answer. Does anybody want to try to answer the question?
Ngaran ge lente mate go la chechu na ne de len de la ya thapsin ane US.
Please.
No. He said no.
No, why not? His answer is in just one generation that mutated on your skin that cannot be passed down to the offspring. Right.
Because the mutation that passes to the offspring that happens with many generations. And he based his answer on the debate between Darwin and Lamarck.
Lamarck, right?
Lamarck.
Yeah. So, back in the 1700s, 1800s, when we were starting to understand the mechanisms of evolution, we didn't really know what mutations were. We didn't have any inkling, but we were just starting to get an idea. Lamarck proposed that you acquire a change in your body and you pass it down. That is a Lamarckian point of view.
Tanda ko kasa ngoma imbana ta dire do aturi choje batwala ya tanda di ko la ya ko ninjur ko la shiu haku yo mare simbana te ko la langlong chong ko yo re ta langlong chong ba de na ne ta ninjur chong ba la tande de cherong la ninjur chong ba imbana ninjur ti ne susu ge ta ku rap chma te la ye jitu chigre se ge tawan zanji chigore sti ta ko sari pa la ma la tere to ga ku ga tawan zan to teres.
And if we understand why that point of view has been refuted over the last century or so, it is for the reason that I'm going to provide here. So if you think about where the mutations are appearing, let's say, for example, as Stanton said, you get a mole on your hand from, let's say, sunlight.
That go tawa jintan tigi thela ya ane devege ane turab chilhas karang la ya dolang shi chambo chong yore swa that tigi lenja la ya karira legre system la ya ane ko ninju saitin jongsa kangkirindu sache ko ala jongsa saitindu the picha shapana gen tenzel lagi twa imbaina lopagi papa gang la ya chong re saitris.
There are two potential places within the genome where this can happen. One is the somatic line, and one is the germ line.
Tanda digi ninju chongya la ya chi chongsa ting asuge ta dirwata thapung ko thene imbaina thapung ta rini gang la chongures ta ngasu thapung rini na ne kangir system bala somatic line system bala ngasuge lipu thapung chkorwa zupu thapung ta che chenda den germ system bala ngasuge dirwa germline system balaya kamdu ki thapong yorwa o te yin cha da thapong mando te ganglaya ani ninju tin jongres.
If we have a mutation that stays strictly on the somatic line, it will stay within the organism and it does not get passed down because it is only through the germ line that we get transition from generation to generation.
Tanda ketis ro ninju chongya te nga su lipu ko thapong ga la ninju chong bai bai na lipu ko thapong gi ane DNA na la ninju chong bai bai na te mare jupe chi ga mare swa te tanda ta picha sha pa na nyimma gi we phopala te ne de tanga so me do chongwa do ton te do gi ninju chong bai bai na te ta rap tarang de ma to pe rap jimala jitu che ne yo mare rap jimala jitu che te kangi ga la yong gore se na ne ga su gi kamdu yo ro kamdu gi thapong ga la ya ninju chong sha ju te ne rap jimala dus jitu chi gres.
But everybody go, ooh, it's kind of spooky. Go. Ooh. Yes. But there is something called epigenetics. And the issue is that there are ways for us to get some type of environmental influence. It could be a mutation or some type of damage that will leave a mark on the somatic line. and that somatic marker can, in sometimes, be passed from generation to generation throughout the genome.
다 이나 양스로 단다가 속에 저 탑풍 리포가 탑풍이 바나 데라야 인주지 대 인주 태발한테 당가 속에 가서 데라야 지 딱다고 지 하바 임바이나로와 하바디 단다가 소 리진 디르글라 테니스 거다로 리진 디르글라 테네 따데 아니가 속에 리포가 탑풍네야 리포가 탑풍다 랍치말라로와다 따티 종사티 라테네데 아니 치말라야 지톱지와티나 요레스.
This deals with the field of epigenetics, and it has been a hot topic over the last 30 to 40 years in biology.
Tanda region deri se ti kapsa tanda netun tin deshi jagore region deri se ti ane devi gi talu sumchi shishigang la ya kudalan chege netun chade res.
So, for example, you may smoke, you may drink. The toxins within the alcohol and tobacco can leave a marker on your genome. And those markers, even though they are in the somatic line, have been seen to be passed from generation to generation.
That picture chapana churanga chantwa dan tamathan dinado yimbaina tamatan chana no you big that kurung tukjiorwa tegi ze tegi ni churanga genome gaganlaya ani kogi ta tado jisha o ta shaba de la tende tegi shuchente ni rab jima jitochio dinayores.
So even though the Lamarckian point of view was refuted, some years ago, a new book came out titled Re-Understanding Lamarck, proposing that perhaps he was not as wrong as we think.
다 실경이 바이나 가서 레마트 코랑가 삼로 당당텔라 야 가파치샤 요레스와 임바나 니비철라 야 뎁사와칠 헤레다 티나라야 아니 레마트 기 코랑가 타완 전타테 가츠그 삼바나자 티데 노트첸시 마레세 티 코랑가 티나나 세우텐 요레스.
Anything you want to add?
Just one thing on that.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that you're with these types of epigenetics, your DNA code stays the same. It's how it is expressed is what changes as you pass from generation to generation. So the code is the same, but what is expressed from that same code is what can be passed through environmental cues from generation to generation.
Okay. Hangada dada digantele khana chijaba imbaina sroada dada nga suge tade tirwa danga su lipu gi thapong la nyinju chongwa la tene de ten khu ma jitu chetis korwa ta danda de kapse nga su rigzi gi sangda de rwa rigzi gi sangda de chiba chichang res imana rigzi gi sangda de chiba chichang re da imana khoi ke netang la tene de rigzi ngoya chiyorwa otila ya jura do de ti de ne ko ramne rab jimala dus jitu chigores.
Without going into too much detail, there is a process called methylation. Do you know the word methylation? Yeah.
Methylation.
Yeah. That essentially dictates how and when the DNA condenses and decondenses.
That de kapse ya jeda nga su jiram chiwa ta methylation system ba methe chanjo sa ji gor tarwa methe chanjo sa di kalresena ani ta khasanga sulo deshe ji ja jore ta DNA ti ko di karsa tambu tang lobu cha ji gorwa o tigi jiram ka se tan da methai tan yam ta chanjo ji ji gorwa te ngores.
So as Chris mentioned, even though these are not mutations, we are not changing the sequence of the DNA. We are changing the way DNA condenses and decondenses and is ultimately expressed in proteins.
That de kapse bana ngasula ya ninjur sa ti ta angot jong ya tenda mare singot ninjur sa ti majong ba bana ya tanda ge ti jurum methylation gi tanda ge methai chanjo ge jurum tila tene de te ngaso DNA ti ko chatambu cha ta chholbu cha ge number tila ya ko shikshen te ko yorwa tela shikshen la table tene de te rigzi ti shin kro ngobi kapse tela ya shikshen le ko res tila tene de ta jura de du ko res.
Yeah, of course.
I think it was you that were asking how meditation might influence can meditation influence your genes?
Yeah.
Meditation. This is how this would work if it does work. If meditation would impact how your genes are expressed or how your genes are turned on and off. And although most of you probably won't have children, if you did, that is how it would be potentially passed off to your offspring. This activation and deactivation of genes through something like methylation.
Yep.
And there is evidence that people that work on having a calm mind, that certain characteristics of that can be passed off to your offspring, or at least there are effects of that on your offspring. If you have a calm mind or a natural.
tanda kesanga suge karsugureda delaya trade kalana ngasuge karsa gonja baina ta tiga ngasuge chi ninju tria tinga mare tiga phala khepar kare zugure mare sa chi trachi ta yo res ta digi chetan de deres zu ngasuge mithai chanjo chi ma chi latene de te ne ko shukchen chiteng go yorwa otires ta ti picha sha baina ngasuge ta manchi shula de delaya ta chisula puyo mare simbai na ya teli gi shukchen latene de ta picha sha baina ngasuge karsa gom jarwa gom jabai baina gom jab chi de te ngasuge ta chi gom jabala ten de ngasuge cheshi ma puchilan jura du yorwa juran do ge juchen te ta da methal chanjo sa ta ane saktam ru mandu sa chi gorwa atila ten res ta ta ke te pugi yue baina gom janye chi baina gom janye te la ko cheshi ma puchi la de yorwa cheshi ma puchi ta ko lelo cha la so pa cheshi ma puchi la ge yorwa oti ane tanda ge da methal chanjo ta tanda ta ko nitan de la jurum de la ten de te ane susu ge rab chima de la ya ane ko ge chechi te du se jitu che ne tan na yong go res tanda te ko la ya ane ko takhshela de tam deshim bares.
Good. Thank you. Excellent. All right, so even though we don't have internet and our access to the Mori points online is a little bit limited right now, if you have any other questions, come talk to either Chris or I, and we will discuss those questions either later or even on day 7 before we do our projects.
Ta tanda imbana ngasu ta trajeti lekha chigum do trajeti lekha chimas tamba ngasu dusta mendu simbai na ya chesule draw yo pa imbana ne person da den kapsge kristanga la kichitri yo perochis na ngasu lancha gos.
Good. So let's jump into our objectives and activities for day 6, which is of course our class today.
Ta tiranga su tirengi nima tukpa terwa nima tukpa dege joshikola tanda tagiyens.
So we're going to learn how to use a poll to access class opinions. This is a way to assess how the class thinks about a certain topic.
Da tiranga su ge samshok pechu tanda tang thopchu ki samlu ki tanda kadada mede chi tagiyens ta de kadada system ba ya thopchu ki jo shito pachka ko la ya samsu kadada uchi ndu te tayares.
Okay? We're going to cover the concepts of GMOs. What are GMOs? We're going to ask that question.
Da tiranga su kare tagiyens na rigchi chingi se tegin tatsu kadada uchi re te tagiyens.
We're going to learn how to research and find the answers to scientific information and scientific questions.
Ta data bigi joshi tinada ko ge ane scientific tathambi ge nitsuti kanda jitsa ko yo mete anga suge jongiyens.
If time allows, we do have a limited amount of time today with our classes, but if we have enough time, certain number of you are going to present a small project, a small presentation on GMOs.
Tekiting asule tisu chong bain baina chichu na ne ya mi khashi chiki ani kalsa ruko chong khashi chiki tanda ruchi chingi ko la ya ndu sta tamshi chigures.
And my favorite, we're going to watch you debate on the concept on GMOs.
Da tine da ngarang ga gashiti kane sestabale lhoptu khachi la ya de ge ruchi chingi ko la ya dolan chi je de la ta ti yes.
Okay? So get ready. Every time I teach, and I'm sure Chris will agree, we cannot teach a class without watching you debate.
Ta gela kurangala dila khilen chigre sangaran zenda tripi kapse ta chesu ge dolan chiwa dila mata ba imba na ngaran zenda thit kamares.
Okay? We're going to end today's class after lunch with an end poll to see how our thinking and our opinion on GMOs has changed.
Ati chela yang asuge thamatela ya samsho chidi de zenda nange chi huptuka samle tang tela ya samchitela ya jiro karin dum de tagiyens.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about the first objective, which is of course class polling.
Da tambu tela yang asuge mugi tambu tirwan zenda ge samsho chigaro te diayis.
When you teach your classes on any given topic, whether it be science or anything else, it's always important to get an assessment of how the class thinks and how that may change throughout the class.
That's a good Senator then big Natunchi Cola Tigo Paina, and so Trilaya, Kutitelaya, Tommy Samsung and Roaching to Stitamputa, then Zendragi, that Tribi, Chung Capservata, Kanza, Jude, Kusugi, Samsutilaya, Jirandu, you make an Etanchikora, or Titayan Ketchambres. So, in order to be strategic on assessing how the class changes, we're going to poll everyone before we start the lecture and after we end the lecture. We're going to graph your opinions, and we're going to have a mathematical value before and after the class. And by looking at those numbers, you can actually visualize, well, is the class going up or down on their opinions and perspectives on a particular opinion. In our case today, it will be about GMOs.
Tinado ge Trankati Duru Samsho de Trankati Trilla Papala Tenedatin, Zendrati Tako Jushi Shitopachiko Laya, Sam to Tantanchigora, Samson Zentanchigora, Teko Yar to do, Man to do Tayores, that Tirangatsugi Jushikanga Tagres, and I reaching Kola Tagres.
Any questions?
Draw Iris.
Good. All right, so let's do our first poll, which is the poll before we start our lecture.
That tamputing asuga samsho tampute DIS.
All right, so Chris and Dawa, I'm going to need you for this. So we have a question here. We have two questions actually. The first one is, have you heard about GMOs? And this is just a question for all of you. Now, the way that this is going to work, yeah, go ahead.
Do you want to show the PowerPoint?
We have to do this first, and then we do the graph. Let's do this first.
Okay.
I'm going to ask the question, and then the class will raise their hand. Either they have heard it, or they haven't, or they're not sure.
Okay.
And I'll put the numbers down.
Okay. I mean, do you want to show the question on the PowerPoint for them to see?
Right here.
Okay. Tada dirwadanda. That tampote choranga richi chingi ko kolaya kunyo US kunyo ems.
I'm going to need your help for 1 second.
Ale that
okay.
Kunyo US rwada len didwa len yes.
The way this is going to work is each of you is going to raise your hand only one time for each of the answers. Either yes, no, or not sure, but you cannot answer multiple times.
Tadela ya lenti jabi kapsirwa ni michi ki lakpa thamachi ma chayo mareswa ta lakpa thamachi chayate kadile changore sena ta droati richu chingu kola charungo kunyo yoes gorwa richu chingu ko kunyo yoes ye lana yeche me lana meche tenda hakuma so kunyo ye me hakum lana hakum dula tres ta kodam kasam doga tigna ne lakpa thamachi ma chayo mares meri ringune.
So, out of the whole class, raise your hand, and everybody has to participate. Raise your hand if you have heard about GMOs.
Ta zendra chama ge jushi chi urda srwa. Ane chone mache dana diko mare srwa ta draw tampote la richi chingu ko konyo yo paina lakpa charo ches GMO ko konyo yo paina. Laba ya chamu ya thumbu charo chama kharchi urda.
Raise them nice and high. Dawa and Chris are going to walk around. If you could please help me count. We're going to count all of you, and I'm going to put those numbers on my Excel.
People just change like, keep your hand up.
All the way up, all the way up.
I got 20. Yeah.
20?
Yes.
That's our first data point, 20. You can bring them down. If you have not heard of GMOs, now raise your hand.
Kunyo me baina laba charo chesa. $29. I got 29. 29.
29? Okay, so a few more have not heard of GMOs. Good. Put them down. If you are not sure, so you did not raise your hand either with yes or no. If you are not sure, raise your hand.
다 담보들라 자녀 자자요 말더라다 하고 마서 된데 하고 문도 군용 여매 하고 문도 슬라바자로치스.
So just so you know, you did not raise your hand before, right? It's the first time you raise your hand? Good. How many? 5. Good. All right, a new question for our poll is, do you think, even if you don't know, that's okay, do you think GMOs are safe?
다 주안이바데 다 됐어라. 주안이바데 다 군용 요파이만에 매반에 디그레스 단데 삼쇼 되고요라. 저런 거 삼스 달바이나 저런 거 삼스 시슈아바이마이나 리치 징위세티 아니 덴저 젠베스 냥카 매바레스.
If you think they're safe, raise your hand nice and high.
게티 냥카 매바 마레 코 덴저 젠레세 바이나 라바자로치에사.
Okay?
라바야자로치. Anga 5.
If you do not think they're safe, raise your hand.
냥카 젠레스 로아다 덴저 젠 마레세나 라바자로치에사. 라바야자로치마 거지거다. 一个俺这大家把家的俺这这个等这个就是就俺这个这等就这18 yes
Okay, you can put them down. If you are not sure, raise your hand.
then 하고 마sos
Good.
我也是讲俺这这个等这个这就是就俺这这等就是这个你和你今年也是你俺也这年的你今年个是手机I got 31 32 yeah 32
32? 32, okay, good. All right, so by doing a poll before class, we can get an assessment of the understanding and opinions before we learn the material.
다 단단한 순전한 맞춘거라야 30도 아틀라 테네데티 아니 전전디 콜라야 간다 CM에 땡아 카르사디 요시디 텔라야 고토카츠 요메징아 수게 하쿠트 그레스.
So just by looking at our numbers, this is quite interesting, right? Have you heard about GMOs? Well, the vast majority, a little bit more than 30, have not heard of GMOs.
다 디콜라야 리치 징고 고뇨 요에스 게제트스 담발라야 미순칠 하스고 고마뇨 라차스.
So very easily, as a professor, I can say, well, half my class or more than half my class has not heard of GMOs.
this 담발라야 nga gigen chim bichane ngin zintra ge chekale mawachike ne richi 징고 고뇨 문두 세팅가 하고 두스.
And let me give you a hint. At the end of class, when I ask this question, what will the numbers look like?
당이 치슬로야 데 년다치 당게 인스와 엔 젠탄디 트차비기 제라야 아니 트원디 땅스탄발라야 트원디기 랭기 땅카티 간단도 치길랭 원 서비스.
Everybody should be raising their hands, right? So we will do that. We will do that at the end of class. And if you're not sure, well, great. This is a great opportunity for you to learn about them and make an assessment and opinion on what GMOs are. So beyond having heard about GMOs, we also have data on, are they safe? Give me 1 second, this is not translating correctly. Let me just check one thing. This should be looking like this. Good. So now, we can actually say, well, from the class, most of the class is not sure whether they think or they don't think that GMOs are safe. So there is a lot of unknown in the class right now.
Da danda de kasu ko ka richu chingi tirwa dinja res re mare te kichi stambalayan jendra na man shishigi tende ha ku mere deus.
And if we compare the people that actually answered yes or no, the vast majority answered no, they are not safe.
Da ko dinja re mare se ge kichi titon stambalaya ane man shishigi ko mare se ti lenja dus.
So that tells me that I have learned something about the way you think about GMOs, that perhaps there is a lot of skepticism. There is a lot of mistrust with GMOs.
That and the digging a karichi kuda take system bala chechu na la ya ane richu chingu ko la ya samsu kari meta ane chetangi bana richu chingu thela ya takasugure chi tokpa ta ane kasugure nam to kari tishu chambu yo pate ane sara kuda take dus.
And that's a very important point, especially if you're teaching a class. You know your audience, you know how your audience thinks and opinionates about a certain topic that you're teaching.
Tike chambu chagu yores chorang ge zanda chi trip pickups chorang ge tresa gi lo piti zuge netin shito pa chi gala ya samnu ka chi kanda do chi tangu yo meti shiati gige junguni ge chambu chagu yores.
What will be interesting is to see how this may change after we cover our class today.
That daily chi ya chi kasugure ge chiwa chi la ya nga su gen zanda ge thomsin de thenu ge je la ya ne de ge the ge samsu de la ya jro ka do chin ru du mi de tayins.
Any questions about polling and getting an assessment through polling?
That and samsho de ach to ka samsho de la tene de ten yol hob trick ke chi samlu ge ka chi ne to shir pa chi ka la ya shi du mu du chen je chu ro de tan de ge twa yo esa.
Good. Anybody here has used polls in, oh yes.
Ale. He thinks for this question, for EE, do you think GMOs are safe? No. For this question, he thinks there should be, it's better to have another option, which is neutral.
Okay, absolutely. And you could make a poll and you could expand on the types of questions. Absolutely. You could set up a poll with 5, 6, 7 different answers, and that will be far more accurate. Thank you.
Tanda de pay apures tanda gila imanda de kore maris tanda hakume se matope ane agenda medus ta de la ya parma chirwa ane ko parma la de chire sambaina de kore srwa ta ko ge dinja yemen dirwa and this tambala gila de pe tatare chorong ge de da dratribi kapsim baina lente la ya chorong la shinga tudung ka so na de ko res lan la damka dirwa lam len la ya damkati ma ba yo pa na ani chi khorong ge leng ta samsuti chi yang ta pa to sa gro ata yang ta pa to ge thela ya thani rin ru res odis tambala ma bo yo pa na ya go yo res.
Thank you. Why do you think it's important that you only raise your hand once?
Ta draw chi try is ani ta de ka sa sansho de be ka sa lokpa thamashi ma se chama cho se sharwa or tigi junsen karchine rendus ti karchine ke chambres.
Anyone?
To get accurate,
right,
to accurate answers.
Right. If people
accurate
raise
number.
their hands multiple times, it would not be very accurate. So we needed to be as accurate as we can, so you only answer one of the 3.
Rather than that, they also de la ya lente ko tata ra mara te ke se ko ra lente tata ra mara ke se tambala ya mish ke thamash ke chana ne kasu chi ba ha ko ra ne thama khase cha de ba de de jota so chan ko ra.
Good. Any other questions about poll? Yeah, question?
Oh, tanda nye sambal yo di lakwa jaya da yang mi ha ma go ni lu ye che la ha ma go lu ni ya ge sang tanda tuwa kha yin na tuwa de len de ya gen no gen ko rang ge sambal tim mo de de wang gen yang kha she so so ngo ne sam so de ma to che lakwa jang de yo de yang si ge ro che sa ha ma go ni to jin len lu wa na pyan to che sa ya sang bu
In quelle leçon?
I think why we are polling, it is nice to write down without knowing who is raising yes or no. Sometimes it might be due to teachers,
Absolutely.
that makes, the opinion sometimes is hard to express. Sometimes
Absolutely. You want to keep it secret. you get rid of what we call bias when you're answering those types of questions. Absolutely. Thank you. Very good point.
Yeah, go on there. Another question from
Sir, I have a question with the polling.
Yeah.
So before class, like as a teacher, we do like prepare the class lessons. So and when we go to the class and we took the poll, and the result is like opposed to what you prepare. So what should we do in
that's
such
fine.
situation?
So polls they don't have a right or wrong answer. That just tells us on how the class has an opinion about a certain topic. It could be different from what I expected, but I learned something from the class, and that may shift as we cover the class, but it isn't wrong or right to have different patterns when you have the results. It's just a piece of information that helps you as you teach the course.
So, for example, like I think my student knows such things, prior knowledge, but when we go to the class and we took the pool, and then they have the basic knowledge there you are going to cover up. So,
Right.
So in such situations, like you are not going to teach the lesson that you prepare, but you have to go to
Review it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When you are making an assessment on understanding on something that you already taught, let's say, for example, I give a poll tomorrow, right, on what we learned today, and half of you respond, I haven't heard of GMOs, well, that makes me think that I probably did not do a good job when I'm teaching.
Te gele tote kare se san sam la ya nga su ge jin zin de chi le ta di chi chen bai bai na zin de la ta di chi chen chi te go sam chi chi ro wa ye bai na zin de la sam sho de bi kap se bai na su su do pa ti ge len to sho chi ra bai bai na kare chi go re ro wa ta ta nga su ge chi sam sho de bai bai na de ya de la ya len de no yo ma re zu ti chi yong gi ne tang ka na do chi ba ti julun chi ya re ro wa ta pi cha sha bai na te yang nga su ge samshon de ba de la tene de nga su ge chi ka su ge ni tang la julun chi de tang su su ge thom sin thia dang de la ya jwa da yo re pi cha sha bai na te ke dis ro ane choram ge ta ti chi zin na yong ane chi thu go sam bai ba na lo thu ma chi shi ti gi ta chi ma nga shi gi shi sha te sing yo bai ba na ane ku ngu tu chi ya thia ge sa te yong ku cha jung go ngo la tang sa na di ku yo ro was ro ta pi cha sha bai na ni tam ti nga su la ya ri chi sing go zin de thi yo re ane sa nya nga su ge yang che sam shok chi de te chi ba chi che de choram ge ri chi sing go ku nyong yo re sa ke che te tri bai na ya ma pu chi ge ku nyong me se bai na ane ngar ge ta ge chi ge bi chane kare so gre se na ale khe sang in zinde tripi kap se ta ya pu chi tri wa samare de khusula ya goda ra chi thro mi du samage ge ya su la ya nga su ge che che chi chi wa ane tan te la ya pe che ta yo res.
So polls are very important for us to understand, well, did my students learn the topic? Do they understand the topic after we teach a class? Or what is their opinion before we teach a class? So it works both ways.
Ta ta de ba na nga su ge sam sho de de chi zin ta ge go ta ju kan de bai bai na ya de ko res chi ne nga su ge tang po de la ya ti ge the la ya khusula sam sa kan ro chi do ka chu chi sing du te ta ta chi ne nga su te cha no ge je la ya ne ko ge ti la shi sha pe ge yang ko ne tang kan sam sa la juan dun do mo de te ne tang kan ro cha yo me ti la ta res ti sta ba la ya ne ko an cha la ya pe cha ta de yo res.
So throughout my classes, when I'm at Emory, and I'm sure Chris also does it, whenever we teach a subject that is a complicated subject, we poll the class to make sure that the understanding is at a high level. If it's not, we may have to review it and reteach it.
Na ngarang ba na Emory lotta typical de page tang yo sigeng cursula page nang yo chres ane chi jo shi dis nyukta sawu din ro nyukta sawu din thu bi yo bai bai na ane nyukta sawu din thu thu bi kap se tan da samsho de tang kusa ne tang kan ro chi yo ba ti jilun chi yes ki ti zinde thi ba im bai na ya ko thinu ge je la ya tan do samsho de la ya nyukta sawu tang gu ma chu ne tang te le yo bai na ane ko yang che je thri ja ta yang che ko khase zo ge yang thap chi ti yes.
Thank you for the questions. Very good questions.
Drop
Anyone
ya
else?
budus to chase.
Ogendo.
You want to take another question? Here.
The pre-test and post-test and the pull kiva
Pre-test and post-test?
pre and post-test
He heard something of like a pre-test and a post-test.
Yes.
And then today you introduced Paul. What is the difference between?
That's basically what I'm doing.
Yeah.
This would be the pre-test pre-test or pre-course poll to see where everybody is in their understanding. And after we teach the class, before we break for this evening, I'll poll the class again, and that would be like a post-class poll. You see how it goes? You have a pre and a post. And those values are going to change, and that tells you something about the understanding of the class.
다 단다게 조발하게 트라트라티 데르왕 아수게 된 전자가 응응기 야 트세치 단 전자게 제게 다 트세스네 직전으로 통통통통 다치고로 데당 단다게 삼쇼데데 케바거레 치파치창레스 다데 임바이나야 프리스나 응wen스고로 포스르네 지스고로 완 전자게 응wen다 제레 담베기 아니 치다 트세스네 트와스나 직토스네 데당 네 데란데랑 아수게 전자게 조시치 모토 마치응오나 삼쇼치디 아니 띵오토지 산우 제레 삼쇼치디고로 네 치파치창레스
Good. Anyone else? Perfect. All right, so again, we'll cover the topics today, and at the very end, before we break away, we'll poll everybody again, and we'll compare both graphs, before the class and after the class.
아하, 따단다 ngasu jushin di che chanu ge jela ya yangsang ngasu samshok che de ne chanu ge je ge samshok te ta ne tanda machi ngeng ge samshok den chi ge parola ya kebel kare do ta ge yens.
Okay, good. All right, let's jump into the controversy of GMOs.
아하, 따단다 ngasu kare ta ge yens na ne richi singe tan revi ge chonyo kokola ta ge yens.
And this, of course, deals with the topic of genetically modified organisms, known as GMOs.
아하, 다 데카레 세나 다 징기 차이르도 징기 차이르가나네 리치 징기 탄데비게 에스토뇨테레스.
So essentially, if we think about the aspect of GMOs and the types of branches of study and other legalities, biotechnology, which is the field regarding GMOs, deals with the legal, the nutrients, the food, medicine, its interaction with developing countries such as India, right, and the environment.
아하, 다단다가 소델라야 디기 리치 징기 콜라 케체셰온 담발라야 콜라야 다치가 니타 mambo chila 콘로와 차데기요레스 다 디가나네 치티칼라나 징기 트릭스 에시도 징기 트릭 바이오테크놀로지 징기 트릭스 에테 리치 징기 주야 기타 트세드와 테레스 다티 강겔라 탄데와 요레스 담발라야 첨탄 데와 요레 테나 사마기 요라 시리탄 데와 요레 테나 멘탄 데와 요레 네 셴데 바나 가수 예진 루시 비제 그 피샤샤파나 자가타와 요라 두저 데와 요레스 팀체 아니 코이 탄 데와 요레스.
So when you think of GMOs, remember, understand that it touches all these different aspects within our society.
아하, 다시 수가 리치 징이 세트 콜라 상부당비 값스 리치 징이 세트 가수고 저촐라 요피게 니탄디 간자라 얀드요 파티체 수삼루낭이 구그레스.
What are GMOs and how do they interact in different societies?
아하, 다 리치 징이 세네카레스 다티코 저촐탄 제커만도 나나코 페추칸나 우시탄고 요레 간다스데와 요레스.
So we could look at a global map, and the ones in yellow, right, are those countries that are currently using or developing certain kinds of GMOs.
아하, 다다 데라야 그 사타데가 타바나 사타 서부 요사스도가 사타 서부 요사데라 아니 리치기 징외 페추탄지 요로 그 주구요 파타 페추탄 요치기 잡케레스.
And of course, we know that the Western Hemisphere is mostly concerned with GMOs. Where are we here?
가서 가야 된다.
Where we are now, right? So we're certainly concerned with GMOs. Lots of places in Europe, a few in Africa for a topic that I will cover in a little bit, Australia, and parts of Asia.
아하, 다다나 디파나 가서 그 따라와 셔던 홀 셔던 너블라타 바이나 다 파족 너브게 될래요. 만주슈기 페추탄 거 도와라 리치싱에 아니 다나 가서 데서 자거시 때네 오스트레일리아체 아니 이시 다다 아프리카 요 사자 카치도와 데체 아니 다다 셰이시아스도와 되게 자카 카치에 페추탄 거 요레스.
And if we think about the importance of utilizing GMOs, well, it has a strong interaction with the concept of securing nutrients and food in developed or underdeveloped nations, such as ones that we are now, and the Western Hemisphere, South America, lower parts of Asia, and so forth.
아하, 다다다 데코 케체시온 스탄발랑 아수 카리시코르세나 지 세기 된적서고라 사마치 따따 쿠투치였어고라 밀란다야가 사마 쿠투치어게 니탄테탄 데치케시기 오레스 데치케시용 비카소 카르스 스탐블랑 아주게 이시에가 사자카치타 아프리카 사자카치 요라 어티게 자카 mam보치라 데데탄 디게 케체테시용 고레스 조땡 아주 세기 된적서고라 세 남당 시샤 케체시용 고레스.
So it has been calculated that approximately 600 million people globally are poor under extreme poor conditions.
다다나가 수 잠라 용라 타바임바나 미탄 사야 트자 참치 아니코 하차가 니탄 오부 조기 니벌요레스.
Unfortunately, a good number of them, about 40,000 each day in our current world today, die due to the fact that we do not have enough nutrients for those people.
다야 디기나네로 와단다 미 디나마부 요비기나네 니마리레라 미 트시스 아니코 시주만당와 칼라마라와라 때네 니마리레진 시두고요레스.
And what is really tragic in our story is that of those people that died every day, about half, it has been calculated, are children.
다단다 미 트시 중국요 바디기나네 아니 지 예수와 지라 디기나네 체카스 부그레스.
So we understand that this disparity of wealth and poor people, well, one of the solutions is to provide enough nutrients, enough food, so we lower the number of people that die every day.
다 되게 세탭치카레스 담발라야 미주 티솔라야 아니 칼라치쿠라 따타도 코트치시 특파이마나 니 미종야고 정세테 진용두그레스 시아테 진용두그레스.
We can work at aiming at producing food and other nutrients at an affordable price that everyone can afford, thus diminishing malnutrition and the number of deaths every day in our planet.
다 케디스 나소게 다 케디 나소게 미 차마게 지금 뉴트히아게로 뉴트히가 럼바티나도 지금 가라야 시티 아니 톤치치 특바이바이나 딜라테네 데땅 아소 시치 만당 위가 강게 땅 네 종주야기 아니 지금 강게 지거와 데네가 수게다 칼레칼레 진용아 땅에 퍼탄트 크레스.
And of course, by increasing the purchasing power, the ability to buy nutrients, malnutrition will decrease.
다 게딩아 수게 뉴위기 뉴바티 진토 땅 바이바이나 아니 칼라게 만당 와땅 아니 시추고 만당 와게 니탄 지거와 어디 진용 땅 크레스.
And developing GMOs can certainly give us a segue, the possibility of lowering the price of food and other nutrients for populations.
다 니탄 디가 값스 단당아 수게 리쥐기 징위 땅게 세리티 텔라야 아니 단당아 수게 코거름 공 아마우타야 땅 아니 지금 단다게 더 시추만당 위 강에 세기 뉴바디 요레스.
The most limiting resource for production of food, of course, is land and water. How much land can we use and how much water do we have access to for the production of nutrients globally?
다 잠로 제치기 테니시 바임바나 가수 지금 사마티 다 튼지 지야라야 아니 그 튼콩 그다 체크라서고 튼콩 용용 요바디까 튼콩까지 스탐발라야 튼콩티 사탄 추레스 당 가수기 지금 시리치 튼지 지구 요바나 딜라야 페쇼 땅야라야 아니 사카수치 페나 페쇼 땅나는 거래 추카추치 페쇼 땅나는 거세 네탄 티랄리거레스.
And with the use of biotechnology, the production of GMOs, we actually increase the yield of nutrients without the requirement of increasing the land size. And that is a huge benefit for food production.
다 세테 제데지가 레스스탐발라야 가수게 징위게 트리기요라 징위 트리기티 페쇼 땅아데다 징위 트리기티 페쇼 땅아데테 다당 가수가 리지 징위티 톤치 제바임바이나 코 사탄 추디 망부 마구이 간에 아니 톤치 망부 지트크요레스.
So if we look at the World Health Map, right, we can look at the wealth disparity. Most of the richest, as we consider them richest countries, are on the north, Australia, few parts of Africa, most of Europe, Asia, not particularly wealthy, South America, not particularly wealthy.
다 단단 가수긴 잠로 제시게 델라야 코게 가수그랬다 제크하게 juwa ju ngibu gi da ko ge shisha de ta ke chi bai bana chukpu imi gi chala shisha bai bana ne tanda chang ari che ane Australia che ane Europe che ane tanda de Africa ge saja khachi do ga ti kusu im bana ta chukpu gi ta je ke chukpu gi res nimda shenda tanda ge Asia ta tanda Africa tu im bana ko tanda chukpu de legi yo mares.
And this becomes problematic because the people that need the most help in the poorer nations are the ones that can't afford the technology or the use for production of their food.
Aha, ta tanda de ge ko jeka ubu inchu saje tuzula ya ane ko so ge tanda chikar sa seri thonchi chi ta ane thuru pecho ta ya de la ya ane ko so ge te la ya ta ko roson te tant ki mares.
And if you think about the pattern, well, in the northern countries, in Australia and in Europe, yes, we can grow GMOs, but in the poorer nations where we can't afford to do it, there is a lot of mistrust and misconception about what GMOs are.
Aha, ta saja khachila ya ko tanda ge richi chingu te tet ko yore simbana saja chu khachila ya tanda richi chingu ge seri chi wa te tet khrot ko maris te matkete kare sistambala ya richi ge chingu ti ko la ya ni ti the chum ta tokpa ta ye ma che ge ne tan ten jong yores.
So you could imagine, I'm from Mexico, I'm from this country, which is not particularly wealthy. You could imagine people in my country look at the north and say, well, they're growing GMOs. We can't in Mexico. So there is something weird happening up north. They may want to either hurt us, or there is some type of unknown which we mistrust when it comes to GMOs.
Aha, ta ngarang la tsum ba imbana nga Mexico ne yong re simbana nga su ge ta chi changsho la ya ta ba imbana changsho go jakot zu la ya richugi chingi slita chi cancer chi te de gu srwa ne nga so te chi yo mares ta cancer ko so tinda do chi chi gi dus ta ti che ba imbana ta chi kale ti che ba la ten de ta yan sam bu cancer tinda do chi che nga so lo no no kho re se ge chi ne ta chi ro ta ne ta cancer u chi chi jong gu res.
So as we continue our discussion on GMOs, think about the disparity globally, about what countries are the richer countries and which countries are the underdeveloped countries.
Anda tanga suga richi chingu kola ya dus dolan chibe kapsa ani tanda ge chiga dela ya parchi towa te zamlang ge satha chitowa tanga suga chupu ime ge chupu to go kanga rendu se tige kun ge parola hebo chembu chi gorwa dige kola ya ni samla tangsha ni tude chiro ches.
And since there is a lot of mistrust when it comes to GMOs, well, the fact that there is a lot of concern and fear on the safety of GMOs, this will lower the production even further. If we already mistrust GMOs, we're going to bring down the opportunity to grow GMOs in those countries.
Aha, da yejen region be kapse bana ko tambutela ya ani khasugureta chi tokpa ta nam to chi gi ma chi ge ne ta ching go yarwa tandong yong ba bana ni shenda tila ya ko ge ta khala ge shela ge khala ge dinja ta ti la ya ani ko ti yarwa semthe ta shena yarwa tila tene de ta tandong ko ge pheji ting gos gres tila goschen shikshan botes gres.
So let's get into some of the science on what GMOs really are.
Ta ga so ge richi singe te kare yemen ge ani chari ki Canada men te chitagins.
GMOs are some type of food or nutrient that has been modified genetically by adding certain genes or certain elements from other species to that same species.
Aha. Ta richi singi se te kare se stambala nga su samare yana sichu na larwa ani nyirik jenda gi rizi chi chu de te ani ko thonchi chi sha ju tin da chi res.
So you could, for example, look at tomatoes. Tomatoes are found globally. I know we eat them here, we eat them downstairs, pretty much every dinner we have. We have a control which is not modified, and we have two others which were modified by some elements, by some genetic elements.
Aha, da nga su de la tabada nga su tomato go pitsen chi shayes tambute le tanzang ro khote ta namjin dirwa nga su namjin ta shela ta pa chis tamal tomato sa go ra tambute tanzan che ani nyua ta sambati na tele yang kho ge ta rizi gi chashi shenda chi lu yores.
One of the side effects that you could see in the control is that within a few days, within 20 days, and within certainly 45 days, well, this tomato is no longer eatable, right? It basically ripens and it becomes putrid.
Aha, ta tanda de la ya tanzan chi sha ju de la ta pa bana ko nyama chire ni shire ti jile nyama shenga stabala ko ta tholo do sarwa salong marwa ko.
In comparison, you have the other two treatments that are genetically modified, and what do you notice across time? Anybody?
다 되고 이제 예쇼 같은 샤코랑라야 르지게 간에 주지지 샤주레 스티스 담발라야 아니 고 디수지랑 본고비 값스 때 켜버까지 두스콜라.
Can you still eat a tomato after 45 days?
이마 셴가 제라 토마토 때 사는 되게 됐어. 되게 됐어. Oh yeah, yes.
Would you eat it?
저런 거 사게 에이언스. Yes.
Yes. Okay, that's interesting, right? So after 45 days, it looks pretty much brand new, like 1 day old, right? There is no difference between a 1 day old tomato and a 45-day-old tomato.
단다 데이터 바나 코라 니마 치타 니마 셴가세 바로라야 코 쳬버시라면 도와스.
And what is interesting is in the United States, being one of the richer countries of the planet, if not the richest, about 75% of the food that is processed contains some elements that are genetically modified.
다 아리 다 가서 던 잠랑강게 더 직시스고로 직시 예문에 직시 멤버나 직시기 텔레츠피게 아리 타우선 바이바나 아리 나네다 20시비로 20시 processed 라나 food setting 고 20시샤주레더와 20시샤주게 사마가 나네 자체 든치동아게 나라야 아니 단다게 직시싱이츠쿠요레스.
Many of the foods that are genetically modified include very common things such as crackers, things that we eat for snacks, breakfast cereals, we have cereal every morning, I see it, right? Cooking oil, and so forth.
다 때나네 지금 단다 든치동아즈 지고르스고로 다티 리눈치 샤주로 리눈치 주티나네 카리오레세나 따티기 나라야 가서 카톡스그로다 카톡 지 crackers 라나 쿠키노 친시치고라다 가서 텐션스그도 자키그로와 티그르디체 네 셴다 가서 그 쇼시긴 드시스그로다 티 시벨세스토 쇼방 가서 칼라사스타 발로도와 네 셴다 칼라나 가서 산남지 디고레스.
So if India is getting nutrients from the United States, it is very likely that some of those food nutrients are genetically modified.
케테다 자르게 네 아리네두스 시주 사마그리디 두스 리노치비 시리데 아니 나데 지기요 파임바나 티나나다 할람 티요레스 타코나라 리주이 징이 요피기다 스차치오요레스.
The most common foods that we, pretty much all humans eat, that are genetically modified include tomatoes, which I'm sure everybody here eats, soy, cotton, canola, corn, sugar beets, Hawaiian papaya, you all love papaya, right? Alfalfa and squash.
단다 데가 수게 데라야 다 참마게 사신바로 토마토 타바다 아니 셴다 아니 다 요사게 리주이 징이 임바테 다 토마토체 아니 셴다테 몬센스고도 다와 사마그리 치도와 대체 아니 템베체 아니 테 캐놀라 남기밀라 캐놀라 서주로 대체 아니 마밀로 토체 뇽마양 가라탄 템비기 뇽마치도와 대체 아니 하와이 파파야 도아레 마보 파파야 사가우도스 아니 되게 제라야 아니 진짜 무슬라스 들어와다 대체 아니 되게 제라야 카페 어떻게 나라야 아니 리치싱요레스.
So next time, like me, you reach out to that salad that you have downstairs every breakfast, think about the fact that many of those fruits may be genetically modified.
다다다 쇼파게 샬로초피 값으로와 아니 데라야 가수고 신토다 망부티리탄 사주 사이시도 쇼파로와 어디도 타야레온 스타발라 치치바나 티나네 망부치 리치기 싱이 인스바레스.
Okay? So we certainly know that modifying any particular food, such as an apple, will improve its lifespan. Just like what we saw with the tomatoes, after 45 days, it's still very much edible. Well, the same thing happens to any particular nutrient that we genetically modify.
다 세르레 당긴 거랑 가서 좀 따버와 세단야나 세주티네 도라야 주기 징외 티치 바이바나 코게 르질라 지치 땅 바이바나 텔라텐데 땅다 징이 치라바티거와 세 치라바티 고 페추 똥 롱야게 티세치거와 다 치세세나 티투인데 렌트 땅게요레스 토마토라야 가서 비싼 타임바.
What do we notice when we walk out at 2 p.m. out of the classroom? Is it hot or cold?
다 가서 연구원 추선여라야 철로 톰바이바나 철로가 가레르두스 타모르도 사오르두스.
Hot. Extremely hot, right? So if we genetically modify those nutrients, well, we could make them to be resistant to drought, to heat, to all kinds of extreme environmental pressures.
하층 그 차오리 자수로 더 많이 많아와 또 단단한 수가 리지 주질라테 리지 주질 땅바인바이나 아니 주질 땅발라테네 데이터다 지신 또다 지 시르크 지워와 데이터 하층 그 차보인바다 아니 베토코레 템바다 지금 남시 하층 게 있다고 자적 남시 된다 여러와 딘다다우인바나요 코스점이지니 딘다도 센트니게 콜라 제주 된다 자요레스.
And you could say, well, great, we can make fruits, other nutrients that are going to resist high levels of heat, high levels of drought. And by doing that, we can increase production and we can think about feeding the people in the world that need it the most.
다 디나로 삼나타나 거레스 다 디나로 시데티 지금 차와 땅 템바 땅 디나로 라야 센 니니게 아니 지금 로토 디나로 가지고 제튼치 터바이바나 딜라테네데티 아니 미 mampu지라야 코 잠라나나 미우 mampu지라야 칼라 코토짓 그레스 디네 삼나타나 거레스.
So we have established that we can increase production, we can increase the number of people that we feed. But the question that remains, the most important question is, are GMOs safe?
다 단단한 속에 디레로 리치 증거티 제바인바나 세리티 튼체 양kum 베부짓 그레스 망부짓 그레스 망부치는면서 망불라 칼라티트 그레스 제바이나 임바이나야 단 데이터 데비기 드와치라고 그레스 드와티 그레스나 다 리치 증거티 냥카메바 그레스 고 덴저가 그레스 드와티 레기 그레스.
So let's take, what do you all think? Before we get into this particular topic, anybody want to share their thoughts on whether GMOs are safe or not? Would you eat GMOs or would you not eat GMOs?
데라양 속에 참그 최초 삼는 건수선로지스 다나가 선데 지금 마숑알라로 저런 대바임바나 리치 정외대 아니 덴저 아레스.
Talk about it for about a minute, maybe 2 minutes, and then we'll share some opinions from a couple of tables.
까마니랑 라야 투데치로체 스테이지레 가수도 계시고스. 투데치 사팔라마?
Did they come and did they come and? So another 30 seconds or so.
Karcha sumchi esa. Feels so good.
Good. All right.
Oh yeah, lasso.
I think
Hello.
I may actually stand right there because it is so hot. I may just teach from that position where I get all the cold air. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
So, who wants to share your opinion on GMOs? Are they safe? Are they not safe? Would you eat them? What do you think?
단다다 건수 선로지스와 기징에테 아니 그 덴자레라 말이스 아니 초랑 이바나 사사레사사 말이스 덴자레라지스
먼저 저희나 단다데 레지킹어데 nenga 체와레스 정말 그 도망도 지정서라 레지킹어 단다 레지 중얼라지 그래서나 그 레지들은 교화전에 양치 그 땅지자다 가르토는 님의 돈을 진저거라 그 벤도도 개체여도 이나 디원게요 제마야 슈징은 바테서레스 그 말이야 겐세 장도다 nenga 몸부지야 용사레스
they constantly these GMOs have negative consequences in the future for many reasons.
So you think there are negative consequences to GMOs? Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else?
And
Yes.
manzo di karsina dir. Poka shunne saris di. Poka shunne saris. Ani nalo la muriya zedi shukchamo gyesa. Ani shura di la kali shura saris.
It may affect your stomach because you are introducing something foreign to the food, and it may harm your
Right.
stomach.
So it may harm your digestive system.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Hello. Nye sambala tanda digi shirang nyekabri kepen yore de puja rinpo la nyesa des. Kanyi sewa ina nanda natural selection de rangju kangi dingdung kurang dhoda shira. Dida mutyumba chawa de zane nyekab kepen wana paju rangju kangi natural selection de la jensha chaya nyanga dos.
It's temporarily beneficial, but long term, in the sense of natural selection, it hinders. It goes against the natural selection. So
Sure.
it will have more negative consequences
Sure.
than
It
the
could be a
temporary
complicated,
benefit.
positive, my friends. If we talk, we need to listen. Okay. As our friend said, there could be a complicated, positive, and negative short-term and long-term effect, which is very possible. Thank you.
Tanda de la ya chisu lan so na ne ko la ya shiching en ba yo sare ani shiching zambu yo sare ani tanda ni kam ke phe tho sare yang ko phijan ra bo la chon chi sare se bon se pe ya son sos.
Good. Maybe one more and we'll continue. Go ahead.
Ta yang chi chi son lo chi das ne me to was.
Tā ngā dzū rūgā na trūdhū kārachūn sila na tānda di rikzē ki tānda rikchū ki kēngu di la tānda tānda sāda chū yu rwa. Sāchū nyamya. Sāchū nyamya.
Yeah. What we have discussed is because of the GMOs, the soil degradation, the fertility of the fertile soil will degrade,
It
and
will decrease.
also the water as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. I will talk about those details later. But yes, there is also an impact on the chemistry of the soil where GMOs are grown. Absolutely. Thank you.
Taran jares nga chuge richu chingi richu gi shinto ta karsa loto te zu chi sa ge de la ya ane nga chuge satan chugi korangi ze gi tupcha chigorwa o te la ya shichin te res ti nga chuge this je la ya ane ngoto chigins.
So let us continue. We can continue with the discussion. Yeah. Okay, one more.
Ane tā ngā tā di sambalandi ngā su shāngtō tānda so ane rikchū chiyōng te sambalandi shāngtō mōngpō mpēyā tānda ni kārere kōrang yīn rāngpō la ane rūyā mēyā nā tu tīndrū sōgandwa. Tā tīndrū rīgipā te ane ngā su mī tāndi sōg rikchī nā la chīchī chiyōng te sambala ngā su chīndrō mēyā ni kārē sa kōrē jinsir yī nā re tīndrī kāngā yāng shikchī ngāmbā te sā re sa mō.
In my opinion, because at the moment we're talking about the food, if that concept is used on human beings, it will definitely have negative consequences in the
Absolutely.
future.
I agree. Where do you stop? Do you stop at the tomato or do you stop at the human being? Absolutely. And there could be a lot of negative consequences if we take it to the organismal level, which people have already done. Thank you. Very good.
Tomato tawachine samsha gembe tenen ko kale mi ga chigimbe sa chigorwa o tine do ni tan tele bai bana ne nyokta sar du res ti ko la ya tudrin baris.
Good. So let us compare some of the benefits. There are some benefits, and we can also compare with the downsides, the negative effects of GMOs.
Da de la ko kepen yo res ro tenen ga so ge kepen da ne ko shon ga du chinde tagins.
So, for example, we could genetically modify some type of nutrient, for example, corn, for it to be resistant, again, to extreme temperatures or even pests, such as insects.
Tanda ane dila yo piga mamilo tota wandira do imbana ngasuge rizile chuje chide tan karchi or system balaya ko chawa la ya koranga zo sentu pata te mse ne ngasuge te sage zambuti da yorwa sanyi buti da bienti da yorwa buti da la yo ko got khinye ge tinda yo zo yores.
A benefit of producing corn that is resistant to insects is that we no longer have to use herbicides, which kill many species whenever they are used.
Ta dina do chiche bai bana ko kipan kari ore system balaya data woge richi ge mamilu to te bai bana dela nga sugo karsa ta the karsa ta science tinda senyi ge dele herbicides la go science senyi ge sa se cha ngemba senyi ge tu tang go ro tang su shingna ja go ta bme sa shi ja go wa ti ge ti ja go yo mares ti ja bai ba na yong ko ge karsa go butang ta ma bu chik se du yo wa.
So by increasing insect and pest resistance in nature, we decrease the use of toxins in the environment.
Aha, that anda ge dina do ga na la ya ne ka su gre ta busin ta ane ko ge ko sanyi ge ri tin da yor wa re ma re o tizu ko bungem ba tizu goya ge ni ba ti shu cher ta ba na ane tizu sanyi ge tu ta tizu nga su khoi na tele ma bo tang go yo ma bo tang go yo ma re nga su bu me jaga ta tizu shu cham bu chi go yo ma re.
What is happening globally to the climate? Anyone?
하나가 속에 다친 잠노 제시기 때문에 또 시에바인바나 아니 남실라야 휴전 가르쳐기요레스 가린 종고레스 남실라야 가린 종고레스. Yeah, global warming.
Yeah, that's how I feel when I go to my room, right? It's getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And if we can produce corn or other nutrients that can resist the heat, that is a huge benefit.
Aha, that ane bala nala nga ti kam nye khana do sta bala pe chau do sta nga swen bana chi ta chau ti be ko tan do char choya ne ta chong go res that ko namshi ti char ru kap so ni ke ti nga so ge chi namshi chau la ya zosen thini ge ane mami lu to dra ro chetin chi thpa bana ala ko la ki pe shi chang bu res.
So we're essentially increasing the resistance to extreme environmental stress, such as the number one, heat.
Aha, that is called nga sugi da ko da truth abugwa truth abugi cholok kita nanchin tinda da wala ya zosen thege niwati future tat kores.
If we increase the number of crops that are resistant to heat and other stressors such as pests, we can make more crops, more people worldwide can be fed.
Aha, that do garwa ku trade ane bungem batina do yoro tinda do la zosen thege loto tinda do nga su chetin chi thpa bana ane du ku nga su loto te ko thonche yam jima tont kne me che ane jamlang ga mi mambula yang ko khalati kutu chit kyores.
So would you agree that this sounds like a huge benefit?
Chesu ta ban dinda chang stambala ko kipen shu yo chro uchi thong des.
Right. I think we all agree that this is a huge benefit, right?
Aha, tada nitan ditan iste ban na uni tan ko like kipen shu chen bu shu do as.
But again, not all benefits come free. There are always implications when it comes to ethics and the use of technology.
Aha, ta nga su ge dinner do kipen ke che chang stambala ya kipen samate kolen roso me pi ngu gan la yo mare stin stambala ya kipen chi ore ti sho la ya ne kon roso ta chi chön ya ko la ya chön tinda ya ma po yong yo res.
So we have established that there is a need to provide for the poor around the planet, and that is a very large number that we need to help.
Aha, ta danda nga su mi mampu chi la ya khala ma ta kange stambala ya nga su ge ta muki ta ni si ge tencha me pi kange ti se la ya ane nga su ge shangli ge thonche ti jima tang go yo res tong konde.
If we can produce food that is engineered to resist the environment, and of course that will give us some traits that are growing very fast at a very low cost, thus providing more nutrients for the people that need it the most.
Aha, ta tinda do ge sama khunye ge meti sula kutu sia ge chetrwa re nga su ge richu ge jinge di kenchi de tang ko chi ya yang joya jokpu yo pa kan sila ay kongyang chong chong bo tinda do che bai na ani mi upu sila khala kutu chit ke res.
Someone in the back just a few minutes ago mentioned that GMOs are unnatural, and we tend to think of them as unnatural, as a mix of different species. So I posed a question to all of you: are GMOs unnatural?
Aha, ta da de la ngela chi che son sta ko richu ge jinge ke che shang sta ba la ya rang shong ta matham ba se ye wa rang shong ta matham ba ko rang shong men bi ge rang shong ta matham bi rang chi ke che son ska chi la ba na ni ri manda wa te 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 ta sha go yo wa ri ji te wa ni sta ba la nge che su la dra chi tri ge yins ane richu jinge te rang shong ta matham ba rang shong main ba chi ares.
So knowing that they are a mixture of different species, of different genes from different species, talk about it for a minute, discuss it within your table, and let us know if you think GMOs are unnatural.
Ta tanda di kola ya chisu ge tutu chiro chis ra ta nga chu rigchi chingi yimba na nyirig mandawa ani ko chingi mandawa ge rigji tete tang ge yorwa tina do chi on be kapsa ko rangshon memba yana rangshon ta matamba en nature se gdwa te rela mares ani chisu na la tutu chiro chis
Go ahead and discuss it.
tutu unzuro nos ta la.
Yes, sir.
On that list, the list of crops that are GMO, is wheat not on that list?
Did I not include it? It should be.
I don't think I saw it. I was just curious for my own. I thought like wheat was like, is your understanding?
Maybe I didn't put it in, but yeah, it should be on the list. I'll mention that. Yeah. I'll double check, but it certainly would be in there. Yeah. Good, okay. So perhaps one table or perhaps two tables want to share your opinion. Are GMOs all natural?
ta richi chingi te ko takasa rangshon yemen chi orwa rangshon te temen chi orwa o te ko la ya ko chi ni chi ko gonso so ro chi da sa
ngaje din nano ngaje guru nano den de jong zoro ndi richi king lai di raju mai ba chi ta khanda di ngaje misu din du lai jo o di dan do do cha do si misu din du
from our group is not these are unnatural and it is similar to the artificial selection.
Right.
Yeah.
I would agree that yes, we are mixing different species. It becomes what we call a chimera, right? You are blending different species, and we are playing with selecting for those traits. It becomes artificial selection done by humans. Thank you. I would agree with that.
Tanda de yagodus tanda de kasembana ngasu mabuch tete tango orwa tete tang yon stambala ya netan de gana ngasu music in them la chwa otti netan de chabi ores te ngasu music in them sa te ta ri mando dina do tete nyiru mando dina tete tang de tang ngasu ge ta susula goya ge chechu ye pati dam du go orwa re mare tin stambala ya de music in them sa te tang dawre so ate ngarang ge ngile chigis.
Do any groups think that they're natural, not unnatural? Okay?
Ni dan dari buat taro kuila ciwarida. Dan dah ngamagi dan dah mizu dimjula di rangsong imbai na dan dah de rangsong ingu kira. Ngama mizu dimjula di rangsong mana dan dah de rangsong mai bacakar kunyi riba ciwaris. Kata rigji dan jero tang yoris.
His idea is if what is artificial intelligence is natural and unnatural. If we think that is natural, this is also natural because if that is unnatural, this is also unnatural.
So there is a worldview, there is a view that we humans, since we create artificial selection, we create artificial intelligence, we humans are natural. We are, again, part of the living planet, of the living world. So what we create by default is also natural.
Ya, shenda chi gongse dina chini yores, ta nga suyin ba na 다 담부텔라 나초 미바이나 코다 랑숑고 차시지 차기여와 나초 다 랑숑고 차시 랑신 종아지거와 다 나초고 트샤주스 다 미카시지고 삼르틴다 요레스 나초기 트샤주게다 다 가사 미주기 댐디기나 디그레 아니 나초기 다 미주기 텐세 바나 미주기 릭세트라도와 오 데타 임바야 데타 참마 미기 조샤제티가 랑숑탄 템바레 세nye 기타오 키냐 요레스.
So that poses a question. If we are natural, what we create is also natural? I don't know. It really depends on how you debate the topic.
다 데라 양 트러스 타요레스. 나츠 랑숑 탄 템바 나츠 랑숑 타 템바 된다 임바나 나츠 랑숑 타 템바 미치 그 조샤지테 랑숑 템바 아레스. 티기 트러테 타 데라 양코 돌란치아 타 양코 랑숑 다민자 요레스.
What is known, what is a fact beyond the point if it's natural or not, is that GMOs, right, are a mixture of different genes from different species, and they is the potential of flow of genes between GMOs and the wild.
Tanda delaya tanga su te koranson ye me sege te kijeti phasha de tanga su kholaya chi ta nyen khasna chechu karichi gore system balaya nga su ge rigchui jingwe te nang la yue pi gi rigji te juchu ta sa chu go rigji jusha ju te ane nga su ge rechi gi jingwe yo rechi gi jingwe chlola yo pi gi jingwe su go ta ma ta ju gi jingwe tu ju la ya ane pi chi ru gi nyen khati yo res.
So for example, you could have a crop of not modified corn and another plot of modified corn next to each other, and the genes from the modified corn can move sideways. We call this horizontal transfer. It can move sideways and interact with the natural non-modified plot.
Na hada ke te pichasha bana chorong la mami lo torwa ate ko rigji chuba chi tama chuba ge shinkan je phatsu yo pai bana de la ya nga su ge ta thepu se ge chiti se deshi jagres ta juju tang sha ju te ge rigji te phajo juju ma tang sha ju ge rigji te ta nyam ta ko de ju cha ge na se tin jung gres.
So what we also know, beyond the point if it's natural or not, and we all have our opinions on this matter, is that there is this big push for any time we eat a genetically modified food, it has to be properly labeled.
Ta danda nga su te ko rangshon ye me ge kejate ne phasha bai bana chitang nga su la ya ruchi gi chingge gi ser ruchi gi ser chi yo pai bana ko gang la ya te ta thu chi 죽어라다 민상지 따고 요러와 따따 따고 요레스 고 리치 징 인사에기 민디 주고 요레스 고강라.
And just like when I drink that lime drink that I drank maybe 20 of them already, it's really good. I also know what comes in that drink. Just like if I ingest a GMO tomato, I need to know what I'm eating.
다 데라야 동야들도 와 정모 동야들 가라바나 답베트 뉴스심 지스톤 차바 연시바나 디 동베 값스 디나나 가레가레 요메팅게 하고 요레스 가라 요르와 디 난싱게 아니 다 리치기 징이 다 리치 징이 시스템 발라야 코 리치 젠다나 치샤 요르와다 이나라레 마레 다 땡가는 거 사고 요바이나 아니 땡나라 가레 치치 요메팅 가는 게 시고 그레스.
So I think we all agree that it's important that the food that is modified is properly labeled, and we are well informed on what is given to us when we are eating it.
This tabalaya ngasugi ta serga richugi serga tina imbana te gangla ya khoge nangla kare kare tipcha kare me tu khaseu gana tridete ne ngasuga saba imbana ya susuge goto yopi gana sa chigorwa te jongu res.
Agree, disagree, what do you think?
Yes, ngile chigi yes.
Anyone disagrees, it should not be labeled, just give it to us. We don't care what we eat.
That la yang ngile mechini yes, tingate mindi trugo mangaso teshan trugo ngaso sa shagin setinya yes. Ayos.
Good. All right. So let's look at some health risks that we know of when we ingest GMOs.
That ane nga tsu ge richi chingwe tina ro saba imbana tila tina de tanga tsu lai trotting tani ne yanka kare yo re se ti khachira ta gins.
A lot of research has gone into this as to understanding the side effects and the consequences of eating something that is genetically modified.
다 리치 싱에 데도 세발라 테네데 코기 지디 카나도 치요메탄 코기 시친 카나도 치 테게 요메티 콜라야 트팅 텔라 시친 카나도 테게 요메티 콜레 심지 카치 두비오레스.
So for example, it has been known and researched that certain toxins and even genes that have been modified have a negative consequence on our bodies, such as our circulatory system, causing certain disruptions in our cycle within our bodies.
다 비슷하바이나 가서게 다 특당로와 특톡실라네 특로와 특당 තනේ 가서 디 가사 코 주치치샤주가 르지테나도 기시르팅 가서레 사바이마나 땡 가서게 트글람라 친데데 가서 징으기 제릴 특특당 하시거와 어딘데 저기요레스.
A lot of research has also gone into linking GMOs with some disorders within our diet with gluten, which is also an important issue when it comes to having a proper diet.
다데 셴다 카레스 담바 리치기 세르게팅 아수가 글루텐 사치고 세르케나네 지기어 차치기 티기 특천 따야 도요레스로와 니스타발라야 딩 아수게 단 남징게 아수게 최시스고다 시초 따야 지고로와 티기나네 케첨부 차기요레스.
A very important work in 2012, so about 11 years ago, showed a research that GMOs, corn with GMOs, was linked to the emergence of tumors in rats. So that is very bad news.
다니 또 존일로 왔다 루치식 нг엘라 야드피기 심지스크나나 카레탄 요레스 스탄발라야 아니 리치기 마멜로토테 아니 지치그나 총아이게 텐탄 되어요바게 어디 탁시지시 요레스.
We have a question?
Yeah, my question is like when we look, when we read such paragraph, it shows that there are some health risks associated with GMO, right?
Yes.
So if so, we saw that like rich country like USA and Australia, they also use GMO. Yes. So in a country like USA, which undergoes FDA check, why is it that GMO is still used?
Well, so you have to weigh the benefits and trade-offs, right? There isn't a perfect solution. There are some negative risks, but also a lot of benefits. So we have to weigh the pros and the cons, the benefits versus the downsides. And sometimes the benefits outweigh the risks. Just because we found a link with tumors in rats doesn't always mean that humans are going to get tumors.
다다다 gelé trotikare sena ro atanda de la yakhoge troting tegi nyekha khachi du sungotre chiang du swa ibana ngasu tangi du supertinda tayo kaps arita wele chombai baina ani rigi gi sergi ti pecho shicham shu tang dus ibana ngasu ta baina ari la yakhorong gi sergi ta ani mengi jinchong han so chi orwa tegi ani takshe chi de ta ku pecho tang chom ku su ta che go orwa that didn't do in Yankan Uyopambana, and a Kusu FDA, Kusu, and a Kut Hachi, Peshet on Chage, Namatikana Rosuina, that water, that Lantica Resabina, that data didn't do you pick up sing Asuki Kipenta, and each Junchan Chalaya, and it's Hejaguris. That Kipenta Junchan Jalateja dete, and a co. Kipen Chambuchi, and it's Junche de Choyo Pambana, Kushichin de Choa, Nambing and Shushin de Choyo Pambana, and as you keep in Chuatilla Shisha data, and could pecheton goods guris. Could touch it on cities that Tanda de Capsang Asuge, and a Casa, Richig, Mamilo Tolatan, the Tzigin Alaya, and if tension, but data could touch it on your dime by Naya, and it's Samala Choatina Maris. Then answering Dilatin the tongue, so Tzigi Layat Casa Tenechon. And it
may be up for you to decide. You should be well informed on what the benefits and the risks are and make a decision based on what you think is going to work for you.
That's on the Casada, Loncho Chini being one, and it's Choran necessity some Kutruchi Guyores, Kutruchians Tambana, Choranga Tade, Alade, keeping in the Digitus, Yankandina Rochindus, that is Tambalaya, Data Shisha data, and the Choranga Pechetangi, May Sat, and Susuguni Tachi Guyores.
Good. Yeah, of course. Jump in.
Another answer to that question is this is a very new field, and so the regulations on it are still catching up with where the science is at. That's one thing to consider, like the science is sort of outpaced our ability to have good data around it to regulate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
다 데라야 코야 치 렌데 카노치 제바인 바나 디게다 당진지야 데라야 코가다 니타 망포치라야 시샤데 다 지고고요와 다 단다디 값스 코다 디 강라야 터제니게 지다 코 소바치거와 코수라야 다 장토 당 니스 망포치 고고요와 코츠기 제데다 아니 단다가 추게 리치기 징이기 생리데 임바나 사바체 아니 테가틀 펜 조포 페도고요와 다 코스 임바나 지가스 그레다 터주 진이데 단다기 디기 예지디기 지마 추어서 그러다 지 쳐발로 코술라야 지다 장토 당 니타마 니츠 망부치 고고요와 어때도 영 코트치 마트가 텐데다야 용고바 니탕 티나다오 요레스.
Absolutely. Thank you. And what is known due to new research over the last 10 to 15 years is that we have found links to all kinds of different malformations, birth defects in babies when it comes to the interaction with GMOs, problems with weight gain, obesity, that also becomes an issue, depression, and Alzheimer's, which are, heavily affect human populations. And they all have been linked to a certain degree to the use of GMOs.
다다 데베가 루치 중앙에 나라 도시 심지 지발라 테네데데 가수게 리치 중에 배치 땅발라 테네데데 디코 트로탱게 탱게 강이들의 요레스타 피샤 샤바이나 가수글라야 지금 넘이긴 디네이션 지체로 넘이 디네이션 지체네 샌다이 바나 양 가수 부기치 땅발라 코치티니 콜라야 아니 코촌요 파치거와 테용와 아니 샌다이 바나 가수 주푸작파차 전부차 지거와 데타 아니 이므그나사네 아자메그나사 라소파게 네탄디 종고 요바데 코 터시지치 toyoresta data karira tene chongresa stambale richi chingu pechu tawala tene data chonyo pachi ani taxi jichi ores.
The last thing I will say before we break for lunch is that yes, we have found links to all kinds of issues in our medical stability. It doesn't mean that there is a guarantee that you're going to have problems, but just that there are links that could potentially give you a problem.
다다 디 참아가레 시스템발라야 가츠고 리치 징에 다 난산디게 리그 바로라야 지다 데와다 우치 타바레스 임바나 틸라테네 데탄디 중그레사테 양코 자체제 셰트바티나도 우치 마레스 딩아츠가 녜파데 코로니가 바로라 드레바지고 바트와 다디 시왈테네 디 중구 요바긴 드레와 템바치로 마토페 양코 타타 텐텐 중구 요바게 양테 텐데 요 마레스.
So as an informed person, you have to decide whether you want to take them or not based on your knowledge.
다 데라야 네츠 티 참아 수술을 코트치바데 하구이 고네 아니 촐라야 네 리치 징이지 테나 데 사마사세데 수수가 네츠 간장 구시우 고네 구츠비 고네 네코 터치지 구요레스.
Good point to take a break. Let's enjoy some tea, hopefully non-GMO tea. Okay.
다 벌써다 치솔레샤스타 We'll
come back in 30 minutes and we'll continue our discussion. I love the fact that there are so many questions, and this is going to be basically a discussion-based class. See you all in 30 minutes.